Greetings. I'm Dr. Tama Bryant, the 2023 president of the American Psychological Association. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And on behalf of APA, we would like to wish you a happy Pride Month. I am so excited for us to have our esteemed guests with us here on today, and I will ask them each to introduce themselves.
My name is Troy Kears. I'm currently a PhD student in social psychology at Howard University, and I study stigma and stereotyping, especially for Black LGBT people.
Wonderful. And do you want to share your title within the association or the work that you do within the association?
Oh, of course, of course. I'm also the chair of the Committee on Sexual Orientation and Gender Diversity for APA's graduate students. So, yes, another service leadership role.
Wonderful. Excellent. And HU, all right, for Howard. And
My name is JD Goetz. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I'm currently a doctoral student at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, their counseling psychology program. I am one of the subcommittee members for APAG's Committee on Sexual Orientation and Gender Diversity, and I'm also one of the co-chairs for the student affiliates of 17, Division 17 student organization. My research
wonderful.
tends,
Mhm.
yeah, my research tends to focus on queer and trans folks and their professional issues, as well as internalized systems of oppression.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited for you both to be here. I'm excited about your leadership roles and also the engagement of our students in terms of setting the course forward and the transformational work that you're doing. So I think it is so important as we think about LGBTQ plus identity, and particularly with it being Pride Month, that we consider a strengths-based approach. And so I would love to hear from both of you about your journey and what you feel in your journey helped you to get to an affirmative, positive, liberatory sense of your own identity. And I will start with Troy.
That's fine. Well, I guess this is probably going to be something that you'll hear often among queer folks. But my coming out experience is probably one of the most foundational experiences that has created more of an empowered activist type of aspect of me. So coming out in high school, although it wasn't a choice that I made, another friend actually outed me. I got so much love and support from my friends. And then soon later, I came out to my family, which was again more of like a pouring of acceptance. Um, so knowing that I kind of had kind of like my village with me kind of empowered me to make sure that I'm doing making sure that I can live and make decisions and make choices to support other queer folk just like me. And then obviously attending the Mecca, which is Howard University, my Blackness has really been central to who I am. And because of Howard's inclusion of queer folks, we have gender inclusive restrooms, we have scholarships and grants that's specifically for queer folk, knowing that even within my own racial cultural background, that there's a lot of acceptance and love that daily infuses a lot of empowerment for queer folk like me. So that's that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it is so important that we have affirmation and support. And so I love you describing it both with your peers and then with your family and then on an institutional level at the university. And what about for you, JD?
Similar to Troy, I was kind of forced out in high school. And unfortunately, at that time, given my location where I was, folks actually, like my peers weren't supportive, but my family actually really rallied behind me, which was incredibly lucky. And it wasn't until I went to college that I actually started interacting with other queer and trans folks and had one of the most like empowering experiences joining like a student organization amidst institution that wasn't friendly to us. So it was this chosen family, like the second chosen family that I got blessed with,
Hmm.
that we rallied behind each other.
Oh, it is so important that you name one, that not everybody was supportive, but it helps to have some people who are. And then this piece about chosen family, right? That we can in certain ways select our community or the people that we pull in close. And I know that's so important. When we think about protective factors or coping strategies, if you each can share one or two that you believe really help not only members of the queer community to survive, but perhaps even in some ways to thrive or to flourish. And again, I'll start with you, Troy.
I'll say, and I just want to make sure I'm very clear, a lot of my experience surrounds my Blackness and my gayness. So I'll speak uniquely to our community's strengths and resources. The first thing that comes to mind for me is just the creativity that we have. Lately, there has been a lot of publications, a lot of books to read, a lot of art and rich, rich art, like just creativity everywhere that you see from Black queer folk. So reading books about people's, history growing up as Black and gay, like George Johnson has a book called All Boys Aren't Blue, which made headlines a couple of years ago, where he documents a lot of his experiences growing up with his grandmother and stuff like that. And reading that is such a good resource for me because I know that I'm not alone. It's a really relatable experience. Daniel Black has another book called Don't Cry for Me, which kind of documents an experience of a Black gay boy who did not really have acceptance from his family and stuff, but then also showing how he's grown and stuff like that. Really, again, it sets in with me because we're everywhere. We're not just in academia or in psychology, but we're also in the arts. We're also in the books. We're also in movies. And I'm happy that in this year's time, in 2023, we're seeing more of that like progressive sort of stuff. And then the second thing is just like, we're unapologetic. A lot of my friends, we just dress down, wear whatever we want to wear. We're so daring and we continue to push the status quo. So that again kind of empowers me to kind of be who I want to be and know that, there's always going to be space for people like us. So that's me.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Love that creative expression, and especially the writing makes such a difference for us to be able to hear the narratives, to hear the stories, and then, as you're saying, having the boldness to show up as yourself and be around other people who have that boldness is really empowering. And what about for you, JD?
I think one of the things that has been quite important for my experience has been, I think, the amorphousnicity, not a word, but
I love it.
The amorphous nature of queerness and like the queer community, because that meant that like in my community, we were able to grieve the hardest griefs while also laugh the hardest laughs, while also being a gender that has a beard and nails and skirts and nothing is how we originally saw it, and now it's all making sense and it's performative while not performative, and it's performative in the euphoric way but not in the like I'm doing this for someone else. And so there was a lot of flexibility and support around that, which just deviates from how we were taught that things should be, that I think.
Yeah. And it is such a gift to be able to have, as you say, the ambiguity, the flexibility, and to write a new script, right? That you're handed one script of like, these are the rules, and then being able to say like, not so much, right? We get to create our own path. And I also really appreciated you separating that nuance of performative but not performative, right? That in that empowered sense, but for the self as opposed to being driven by others. So I know that queer psychologists have made such great contributions to the field, and they're not always recognized. And so I would love if each of you can share with us one or two psychologists that you really think people should know about and that we should read more of their work. And this time I'll start with JD.
Thank you. This was a really hard question for me, because there are a lot of people who have been incredible mentors for me, who are queer psychologists, and they formed that for me. But I can't necessarily point to their work because their work was very community based and not like easily like quantifiable publishedness. But it did make me.
That's all right too if it's around them out.
Yes. But I did, there was someone that popped into my mind, particularly around my like early development, that I think has formulated a lot of us. And that was actually Charles Silverstein, who was an activist psychologist and particularly around the 70s, gave a very influential speech around to APA around queerness and largely next to conversion therapy practices. And when I was an undergrad doing research on conversion therapy, I found kind of his speech, and that altered my world when it came to like recognizing internalized oppression and internalized stigma and how that was a system of the environment and it drew my attention, and it should draw others' attention to the ways of systems of power and oppression as kind of external influences of this source of oppression. So I think that's who I had to land on.
Yes, yeah. And I really appreciate the acknowledgement of both because, there are multiple ways of knowing and multiple ways we contribute to the field. And so whether it is by speaking at APA or through written scholarship or through the community work and the lived work, whether in our departments or out in the street in terms of activism, all of those contributions are necessary and fuel us and also help to shift and enlarge in the field. So thank you for that. And Troy.
So I have a couple Black queer psychologists I want to highlight. The first one is a very dear mentor of mine and a collaborator who is Skylar D. Jackson, an assistant professor at Yale who does a lot of work on intersectional stigma and mental and sexual health. Such a great soul, just so moving and just such a great person, just scholarship-wise, but also just personally, just individually, one of my greatest mentors I've ever had in my life, honestly speaking. And then the second person is Jonathan Lasseter at Rowan University, who's also an assistant professor, also does like a lot of Black LGBT health, but has a really cultural lens to a lot of the work. So talking about religion and spirituality that maybe Black, gay, bisexual men may experience and stuff like that as they're also navigating their cultural backgrounds. So both of them really came to mind. Have great work, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the contributions.
Wonderful. And so following up on something both of you mentioned, conversion therapy for you, JD, and intersectionality for you, Troy. I'll first ask you, JD, if you can speak to the harms of conversion therapy and the gift of whether you frame it as affirmative or liberation oriented care. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so where I grew up, there was a lot of practices of like kind of pushing people when they came out towards conversion therapy. And it was not great because when I did this report, I had professors who at the same time were saying, oh, well, if someone's looking for it, shouldn't I just do that for them? And it actually was Dr. Silverstein's work that gave me a response to that of no. But seeing how a lot of communities have worked together to fight for that, fight against conversion therapy, both in and out of it. My work more now has shifted away from focusing on that and focusing more on liberatory practices for trans youth and trans folks, particularly living in states who have regressed and pushed a lot of really anti-trans legislature for kids. There's a lot of hardships that are like there's a heavy weight that people are really sitting with, and I hear it with my clients, I hear it with their parents, I feel it in my bones as well. And so but I also want to stress that I am seeing so many people who take this work, like I'm getting emotional because it means so much to them, but are taking this work and are saying, we are going to work together to change this. So they are working in conscientiation, if you will, and problematizing and really addressing these problems as a community, not to save others, but to rather empower and liberate themselves. And there's just so much strength there. And I just love it. Oh, no, I love it.
Oh, thank you so much for speaking that, both the issue and a part of solution making. I do have to give a plug because the APA now has 2 books out, one on liberation psychology and one on decolonizing psychology, and they both speak to these liberatory practices. So thank you so much. And Troy.
So I'll speak more uniquely to like intersectionality and kind of how that work intertwines. So one thing that people don't often understand about intersectionality is that it's talking about the interlocking systems of oppression that many racial and sexual minorities and all other types of intersectional identities experience. So I just want to start off prefacing that. So some of the challenges that, and I'll speak more so about Black, gay, bisexual, or Black queer people in general. But for Black gay men, for instance, they may not feel safe going into areas that are populated with white gay men, right? And there's many factors that can contribute to that. So anticipated racism or discrimination among or within the queer community, which is a thing. Heightened sensibility to like police presence when you're coming into a space. So understanding how like socio-political or even like just space and place kind of just has negative effects on people when you're coming into place, especially when it has historically continued to marginalize Black men, either through police violence or just racism in general. And then also sometimes Black gay men, when we come into spaces, we may have this fear or mistrust of others because of this fetishization of Black men. So again, because of the interlocking systems of being a Black man, but also being a gay Black man, really uniquely sets us apart from other people who are also dealing with different types of oppression because of the cultural, historical values around that. I do want to mention, though, I am currently, I'm currently co-writing with Dr. Jackson, who I mentioned earlier, about a paper that's talking about how Black LGBT people who are, I guess, Black and Latinx LGBT people who experience both heterosexism and racism, they have trouble determining who can they run to for support, right? When you're dealing with racism, can Black LGBT people go to their LGBTQ plus or queer friends? Or on the other side, when you're dealing with racism, can you go to your LGBTQ plus people, right? And so even making decisions about social support is not as easy, especially when you're dealing with overlapping stressors and overlapping experiences of discrimination. So I just wanted to mention that as well. That's kind of one challenge that we're starting to see emerging. We're understanding this intersectional, interlocking experience.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that so much. The call for us to consistently attend to the multiple margins and centering those, right? And centering voices and stories and spaces, needs and contributions. And this work is so rich. I think sometimes when people hear all the layers, they can feel like overwhelmed, like, oh, this is too much. But I really encourage us to shift into seeing like the gift and the richness of the diversities that exist as it relates to all of our various identities. And I do want to acknowledge, since in this series, we have 2 panelists, across the series that we don't have a queer person represented who identifies as she, her, and hers. So I want to name two issues. One, former President Frank Worrell, who was the 2022 president of APA, one of his initiatives is focused on combating violence against trans women of color. And this is so crucial that we both recognize the high risk and high rates of violence against that community, and also the necessity of us working in a preventative way and also developing interventions for those who have been impacted by that violence. And then as it relates to the contributions on an intersectional level, I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Beverly Green, who is one of my mentors in the field and writes so well about these issues of intersectionality. So I want to now shift to the fact that while there is stress and trauma in the community, yet you both keep showing up, and I want to say showing up with joy. So I want to ask, what gives you hope? And I'll start with you, Troy.
Well, you're right. I mean, in a climate that pushes against, the status quo and have ongoing political movements and identity-based activism, there's a lot to see. So I'm exposed to like many debates and conversations about topics regarding LGBT plus folks in our community and generally, especially those that are multiply minoritized. So work is being done, right? People are having conversations, people are debating about it. Even though some of these conversations may fall to deaf ears here and there, or may not progress as quickly as we may want it to be, there's still some sort of meaningful change that we're seeing. And that kind of gives me hope. So for example, I mentioned earlier that Howard has gender inclusive restrooms, but we see that in other public spaces as well. So seeing that because of activism that's happened before, although at that moment it may not have felt like things could actually happen, things have ended up happening. And so that continues to kind of give me more hope and kind of sustains me. And when I see that they're not taking no as an answer, I don't take no for an answer. So it's just more like I feed from the energy that I'm taking in every day. And that keeps me motivated to continue to do the work that we do, not just with APA, but just broadly.
I love it. Not taking no for an answer. We are moving forward, and the pushback is real, but you just come to expect it and know, that many people will try to protect the status quo. But that, you look at these other models, both your peers and those who come before us, and it helps to mobilize and motivate us to keep going. All right, JD.
When thinking about this question, I reflected on this past year where I actually got to work a lot more with parents of trans kiddos here in Tennessee. And I was reflecting on this year, and I was I had felt fairly hopeless at one point this year, I'll be honest. But when getting to work with these parents, I saw there are times where they were devastated, but then ultimately they started working. They stepped up for their parents in a way that I haven't, in mass, in a way that I haven't seen in previous years. And that was one of the most beautiful and hope-inspiring things for me, was to see the ways that from my childhood, from the childhood of my mentors, from the child of their mentors, the ways that families are coming together is so different and growing that just gives me a lot of hope and community.
Yeah. And thank you so much for the transparency and honesty, that there are times when it's despairing. We look at the state of things, and it can deflate you. And so then looking for ways to refuel, to be re-energized or inspired to get back in there. And I think that's important to name because especially those who are newer to trying to be a part of this transformation and advancement, there can be a shame if there is the discouragement or the fatigue. And it's important to know that's a part of the journey because it's a labor of love, but it is labor. So to close out our time, I am a lover of proverbs and poetry and music, and I would love if you each can share with us either lyrics or an excerpt from a poem or a quote that can help us to really celebrate this Pride Month. And we'll start with you, JD.
I had to pull it up so I didn't mess it up.
Okay.
But this is a poem from queer non-binary poet Andrea Gibson, and it's very short. It's called "What Can't Be Taken," and it starts: "Trauma was not being able to get the hands of the clock off me. Healing was learning that no one ever has ever laid a fingerprint on the part of me that's infinite." And to me, that was such a oh, that's again another num moment.
Yeah.
That healing, focusing on that healing and the infinite nature
Yes.
of it.
Yes, I love that. The part of me that is infinite. Definitely. All right, Troy.
Well, I'm part of the Beehive and as part of the larger Beehive community for Destiny's Child, the legendary Destiny's Child, I'm going to quote, "I'm a survivor. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to work harder, period." Okay?
Yes. Oh, I love that. And for us all to survive and to not give up, I hope that each of you will leave the viewing of this webinar and commit to not only researching more and learning more, but also being an active part of the work for us to oppose oppression in all of its forms. Thank you so much. You all take care.